Good afternoon. I can't help but comment on what's going on with Israeli speakers, singers, events to give encouragement and strengthening to the Jewish community and to show solidarity with Israel. There are a group, and it's a minority. They're a vociferous minority, and because they can intimidate, that's what gives them energy to go ahead and get their point of view across, which is to shut down any kind of discussion, any kind of meeting, any kind of awareness that runs contrary to their lunacy, their violent and vile, evil opinions. I am shocked by the laissez-faire, unresponsive attitude that seems to be going around in the Jewish community in these places, allowing them to disrupt an Israeli speaker who served in the IDF, who is an attorney, who's articulate, who defends Israel internationally, is not just a shanda. It's an expression of defeat. You've given up. You're afraid to stand up for your values. You think that by not reacting, that somehow or other that's strength. That's not strength. That's weakness. The University of Berkeley is a bunch of cowards, a bunch of left-wing lunatics who probably told the police to stand down and not do anything, that not a single person should be arrested, breaking windows, intimidating, attacking students for going to an event. If it was turned around that the JDL, some Israeli group, would have prevented a Muslim from talking, there would be no end to the protests. I don't understand why people just take it and accept it. I know that in the 30s, there was a group called the German American Bund, and they were doing demonstrations, anti-Semitic demonstrations, in the city of New York. And Justice Brandeis contacted one of the Jewish mobsters. I don't remember if it was Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, or one of those guys. He told him, I don't want you putting them away. I just want it to stop. So 10 Jewish boys came to those events with baseball bats, cracked the knees of those people who tried to intimidate Jews in their city, and the German-American Bund event stopped. There's got to be a point where, not that you call for violence, God forbid, but when force is expressed in a limited way, which gets the point across that you're not intimidated, those events stop. The reason why these protests are so vociferous and they call it genocide is because Jews are winning. It isn't genocide. It wasn't genocide when they murdered 1,200 Jews. That was vindicated. That Obama said was the result of 75 years. 75 years of what, Mr. Obama? In 1929, there was a pogrom in Hebron. Unspeakable acts of terror and cruelty were perpetrated by a violent Muslim mob instigated by the head of the Waqf, the Mufti. And then there were other violent pogroms. That's the history. That's the real history of what goes on. Jews reacted to these things. They weren't the instigators of the violence, Mr. Obama. We defended ourselves for 75 years. And very, very judiciously defended ourselves. Because every time a Jew defended himself and went beyond the level of self-defense, he was castigated not just by the world, by his own people in Israel. Baruch Goldstein killed 29 Muslims. What did Shimon Peres say about him? What did the left, the Jewish left, say about him? Oh, there was terrible. What about all the hundreds that were murdered during the Intifada? Under your presidency, Mr. Obama, under Clinton's presidency, Mr. Obama, look at the hundreds and thousands that were murdered during the years after Oslo. The result of the so-called peace process has only been violence. And the reason why there are many more Jewish deaths after Oslo than before Oslo is because when they smell weakness, they feel that they can attack. The amazing thing is, they didn't succeed in Harvard. Yishai Ribo sang at Harvard because when the help refused to help, they hired other help. And I'm sure that they had adequate security. They didn't rely on the left-wing security of Harvard University. And that's why the protesters couldn't stop the concert. I'll tell you a little story. I heard this from one of my friends. His name will be anonymous because I'm not going to tell you his name so that he doesn't get looked up and get death threats. He's 77 like I am. But about 60 years ago, Crown Heights was being attacked by gangsters, by gangs, by individuals who thought that they could intimidate the Jewish community into leaving. For the most part, they did, except for Lubavitch. But they started attacking the kids at the Lubavitch Yeshiva at Bedford and Dean. And the boys and the parents complained to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Rebbe's response was, I don't understand. There are older boys in that building. Older Jewish boys that are strong boys. It should be terrifying for somebody to come by that building and to try to do something. Well, whether they were right or not, my friend had learned some karate. He was about 5'10", maybe 5'10 and a half, 180 pounds. I had a friend about the same size. So those days, if people try to intimidate you, they'd come over to you and say, hey man, you got a nickel? But I was playing ball in Lincoln Terrace Park when I was 14 years old, 63 years ago. A kid came over to me with a razor blade. And he was taller than me and obviously faster than me. And I had no place to run. The kid wanted some money. I had none. Threatened to cut me, but because I had never been cut, he didn't want to be the first to cut me. That was the reality of what you had to live with in the 60s in Crown Heights. And that's the reason why so many Jews left Crown Heights and moved to Flatbush and Borough Park. At any rate, the standard how do you do was, hey man, you got a nickel? So my friend walked over to this big guy, about 6'2", 6'3", maybe a couple of 100 pounds. He said to him, hey man, you got a nickel? The man didn't know what to say. White Jewish kid with a yarmulke asking him for a nickel. And it's usually the other way around. Well, before he could respond, my friend took both his hands and gave him a karate chop across the head, knocked him out. That was the last time anybody dared to attack Jewish boys at Lubavitch Yeshiva at Bedford and Dean. I'm not advocating that you go ahead and ask a guy for a nickel and give him a karate chop in the head and knock him out. What I am saying is that it is a chilul Hashem, it is a desecration of God's name, that these people can intimidate Jewish kids and not feel any fear. They should be terrified. We have people who learn Krav Maga. In fact, Krav Maga is one of the best defensive skills that are taught in the world. And the ones who put it together are Israelis, Jewish people. It should be terrifying for these so-called protesters to come there. They should be afraid. They should be shaking in their boots. And if they're not, that's a chilul Hashem, unfortunately. I'm glad that Ishai Ribo sang. My thoughts are, it was done at the Chabad house or under Chabad auspices, and they made sure that it would go without a hitch, despite the protesters. All I can say is, Am Yisrael Chai, we should not be intimidated, and our people should not have to cower in fear when they speak or when they gather. It should be the other way around. Those people outside should be fearful for their lives. And until that happens, we're going to have repeat performances of Berkeley. and I hope that's the last time it happens.